and welcome back to the Mindful Living Summit. I'm Ann Alexander, and I'm the content director for Mindful, and I'll be your host for today's session. I'm happy to be here today with Elisha Goldstein, and we're going to explore mindfulness and working with everyday challenges. Dr. Elisha Goldstein is a psychologist. He's also the co-founder of the Center for Mindful Living in West Los Angeles. He's also the creator of a 6-month coaching program that's called A Course in Mindful Living. He's the author of numerous articles and also best-selling books. His best-selling books include Uncovering Happiness, Overcoming Depression with Mindfulness and Self-Compassion, The Now Effect, How This Moment Can Change the Rest of Your Life, and also Mindfulness Meditations for the Anxious Traveler. Elisha also co-developed the very popular youth program called CALM, which stands for Connecting Adolescents to Learning Mindfulness, and he co-developed that with his wife, who's also a psychologist, Stephanie Goldstein. So thank you so much, Elisha, for being here with us today.
I love being here. It's fun.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in. So we're going to talk today about how mindfulness helps working with heightened, overwhelming emotions, things like anxiety, stress, and depression. And as the world gets faster and faster, and we're all expected to do more and more and more, how is it that mindfulness can help us with things like anxiety, stress, and depression?
It's a really great question, and as you said, kind of one that's needed for our times. I mean, I just put out an Instagram post, and it said, like, is it just me, or does it seem like there's just so much happening in the world right now? And I know people that are into more of the astrology, and they're like, Mercury's in retrograde right now, and so this is kind of what's happening. And in any given moment, there's kind of three things going on, and we're having thoughts, we're having emotions, we're having sensations that are happening. And mindfulness, what I found in my life, provides the ground, which is this awareness, provides the ground to be able to see, what's going on, how is my mind working with it, how is that impacting me emotionally, how are my emotions actually influencing my perceptions, and if I can, from this awareness that's here, if I can shift my focus or open it up to be able to see more possibilities, more perspectives, more choices, then what happens is I become less enslaved to the habitual patterns of my mind, which might be common patterns that lead me down the path of anxiety or depression. And I can find that space between the stimulus and response to choose how I want to relate to whatever this is, which might be a way that's going to support me in helping me feel more confident, more resilient, to whatever I'm focusing on that moment.
Well, can we talk about that? Because maybe you could explain some of the mechanics of that. I've heard you talk about the depression loop and also mind traps and sort of that spiral thought patterns. And I think it's really important to understand how we get stuck in that. So can you help just explain what those loops are?
Sure. And I guess I'll explain it with a story, to first, which is that, when I was years ago back in the .com boom, and I was working hard, and some people might say, and myself included, like playing a whole lot harder, and abusing myself with like drugs and alcohol and a variety of things. And my focus at the time, I wasn't aware of this, but my focus at the time was kind of like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I get this right? Every time I try and break out of these patterns, I seem to just fall back into them again. And that what's wrong with me, my mind focusing on what's wrong with me, led me to feel kind of depressed and also anxious. Like I can't break free from this pattern that's here. And then in my body certainly didn't feel energized by that in order to like break out of it and like do something different. Although I was being creative at the time and doing other things, but I was caught in this loop. And then the behavior was, as they say in the addiction world, and this isn't HBO here, so I'll keep it clean. Where was the efforts, where basically I was just like, forget it, screw it, who cares, like that kind of thing. And I would fall back in the same patterns, which lead to the same shame cycle, and I would get caught in the same thing. And so the depression loop is similar. I was caught in that, where we have a certain thought, inner critic, limiting belief that's there, or maybe it's a comparing mind, which is kind of like the inner critic, I guess, which says I'll never be like this person, I'll never get like that, which we're completely susceptible to in the social media world. But where I'm focusing on this gap, and that's the thought that's there, and then the emotion is fear or anxiety or sadness or grief or some kind of like negative feeling, that's there. We might say negative just so we have a common language in here, something uncomfortable. The love can be very uncomfortable too. So something uncomfortable. And then the sensations was like a heaviness or a restlessness or an irritability, or like I was just kind of like there. And then that would lead me to follow the same loop. So mindfulness, what it does is allows us to see this loop. I call it the depression loop. We might call it the anxious loop, or we might call it the stress loop. We might call it the habit loop, whatever we want to call it. See it. And when we see it, what's so powerful about that, and in my own experience, what was so powerful in my life when I was invited at the time that this was all happening for me to go away for a month and go on this retreat in Southern California for a month. It was like a Jewish retreat. And I was introduced to this guy there that, had me like bring all my attention to like eating this orange. And I thought he was just totally nuts, at the time, but I was like, whatever, I'll entertain anything. And I'll never forget when I opened it up and I saw like the zest that kind of popped out, and I saw the membranes and I saw the veins, and I started eating it. And it was like the tastiest orange I'd ever tasted in my life. And what happened was, what was fascinating, if we look at that and we talk about the depression loop, is with the depression loop or the anxious loop, or, this kind of suffering loop that we get caught in, we have a certain focus. And the focus is on, typically me, what's wrong with me? And he had me do something different. After I went through that experience, first of all, he had me focus on what was present in the moment, me and this orange, just me and this orange. And then he asked me after I was done with that, he's like, well, how did that feel? And I go, I feel great. That was amazing. And he said, and the focus was, what would the days, weeks, and months ahead be like if there was more of this in your life? In other words, he was saying, the focus is, what would life be like if you felt better, if you were happier? So the focus wasn't so much on what's wrong with me anymore. Now, because of the mindfulness, which is the ground, this awareness, I was able to shift my focus now onto what could be right. And that shift in focus makes all the difference. And mindfulness is the grounding to be able to do that. So what I learned in that experience for me was I needed mindfulness in order to create a foundation to open up the choices and possibility and the variety of freedoms that were there for me, that within the depression loop, I was unable to see because it's an unconscious habitual pattern. So I was able to, mindfulness allows you to interrupt it because it allows you to step outside of it and say like, oh, I see how my focus is going to what's wrong with me, or how I can't do this thing, or these limiting beliefs that are there, and see how it's affecting my emotions and sensations, and see how it's leading to me not to want to feel those emotions and sensations. So it leads me to these behaviors to try and avoid that, which only leads to the shame spiral again. But with mindfulness, we can choose a different focus. And that's what was so powerful to me about that experience, was it opened my eyes. And it's what I've been teaching people now for, a couple decades, but it's opened my eyes to, wow, I don't need to be enslaved by these old habitual patterns anymore, really, of unhappiness. And I can choose to shift my focus, not to just Pollyanna rose-colored glasses, but to be able to ask a different question. What would life be like if I was happier? What would life be like if I was doing better in life? What would life be like if things felt more balanced for me? Like, what would I be feeling? How would that make me feel? And that feeling, by the way, this is not necessarily something that's taught in the mindfulness field so much, but it's powerful that our feelings drive our motivations. Sometimes with that question, we shift our focus to like, what would it be like? How would I feel if my life was like this? Brings up a certain emotion, which creates a certain motivation to then align our actions in the direction of that. We will go on that walk or jog now. We will start eating a little better now. I will get to sleep earlier now. I will focus on writing that book now because I can see and feel how good that's going to feel. And with mindfulness, that is the foundation grounding, which allowed us to even go down that road at all.
Listen, I want to make sure that people who are listening to this have a clear sense of mindfulness gives them the ability to sort of see this loop that they're engaging in. And then how do they break the loop? They start to think, oh, okay, I see the loop. I'm engaging in these not such good behavior patterns. And what questions can they ask themselves? What could be right? Is that helps you?
So the first thing we want to do when we notice this loop happening is we notice we're in a stress reaction, really. Even depression, anxiety, any kind of form of suffering arises from stress. And so likely our body is having some kind of reaction in that moment. It's physiological. And so what we want to do is, the first thing we want to do is soften our bodies. This is the very first thing I teach in that 6-month program you mentioned, A Course in Mindful Living, because it's foundational. We have to learn how to begin to balance our nervous system. That's going to enable us to be more present. It's going to be easier to be more present when our nervous system is kind of starting to cool down. So we have that moment of mindfulness. We notice the loop happening, and we say like, oh, I'm caught in this loop. This happens to me from time to time. In fact, this is a human experience that this loop happens for all kinds of people in different ways. And so then the question is, so then we kind of soften our bodies, take a couple deep breaths, and we can go to that classic self-compassion question, which is then, what do I need right now? Like, what's needed in this moment right now? And then what I like to do with people I'm working with is create a kind of an inventory of a variety of different types of needs they may have at different times, because in those moments when we're not feeling well, our brain's really not online 100%. And so at least the part that's going to be able to choose adaptive responses. And so we don't want to have to think about what do we need right now. We want to kind of have that laid out for us so it's familiar to us. So we write it out, journal it, different needs we might have. Maybe it's whether it's connecting with someone or taking a walk, or whether it's doing something soothing for ourselves, or whether it's just kind of resting in that moment, or whether it's refocusing on a different question, or whether it's refocusing on something productive that I need to do right now in this moment, because that's what really helps me move through this. And we can have a variety of different needs. So those are 3 questions. Those are 3 things we kind of do. We recognize the loop. We recognize that, this isn't just me, right? And then we can go down into either what's most important for me to focus on right now. But if we're really like having a tough moment, we might focus a little bit more on like, what am I actually needing right now? And then creating that list inventory of needs is really important, so that you don't have to really think about it too much.
Right. I think that was my next question, is when you're either so anxious or chronically stressed, or you're so caught up in the loop, it sounds like having that ready-made list is really, really important.
Yeah, because we don't want to have to think about it. We want to have it ready for us. That's right. So, we want to make this as easy on ourselves as possible and give ourselves the best opportunity for, for lack of better words, kind of success. And what I mean by that is that we have to realize that when we're disabled in the moment, like we're not at our best, like it's okay to have scaffolding. And these types of things, these types of lists that you've written out that come from you or you've worked with somebody else, like are a form of scaffolding that could help us remember, like, what is this what is helpful for me right now? In my book, Uncovering Happiness, I talk about how, we can start to create, different lists for ourselves, lists of things that give us a sense of accomplishment, lists of things that give us a sense of pleasure, lists of things that are like playful type things, lists of things that ignite these natural antidepressants around mindfulness and self-compassion and play and compassion, these different things which help. Compassion helps us get outside of ourselves. Unless we're a caregiver and then we're just totally burnt out on compassionate responses, then which some people might make the argument, well, then they weren't totally compassionate, because compassion includes yourself, and that means you weren't taking care of yourself. But there was the empathy fatigue, nevertheless. And but there's a variety of these different things that can be supportive. Even like getting outside. My God, getting outside and taking a walk for 20 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes can be enormously powerful in kind of resetting that loop.
Right. And I would imagine also, I love the idea of having the ready-made list. And I'm just thinking, anticipating some folks, I would imagine the size of our loops can also change, right? Sometimes we might be in that really blah, huge loop where you just think, oh, and sometimes they're smaller loops. So it may also be, I mean, I'm asking you, is it the case that there also may be trade-ups? So like instead of binging, maybe there's something that isn't quite as healthy. Maybe it's just like, I'm going to space out and watch TV.
Yeah. So you're creating on these lists, you're creating like easy to go type things, which don't take much effort at all, to like larger things, which take more effort, right? If you're like totally overwhelmed, you're going to need to maybe sit on your bed and pet your cat. Maybe that'll be soothing, and that doesn't take a lot of effort. But if you're realizing this is like recurrent and you have the wherewithal, maybe you really need to take a break somewhere and you are getting burnt out and you need to kind of do something for yourself that takes a little bit more effort, taking a day out or taking a trip or doing something, of that kind. But yeah, creating a continuum of things that you can do. And now I'll just say this, Anne, because this is important. When we're caught in the loop, and this is important for everyone, if you're listening to this, to like maybe get out a pen or a paper, write this down, because this is something that you're going to want to hold on to, which is our brain is typically focused on what we can't do. And when we're focused on what we can't do, it's a little bit a product of learned helplessness. And that's a product of feeling anxious or depressed over time. So instead, one of the things that we can ask ourselves, which again is a shifting of our focus, which only mindfulness can help us do, because mindfulness is that awareness to be able to see that our mind's even asking this question, is to ask the question, what can I do for myself that's in service of myself right now? What can I do? It's just a simple question, but it can be so powerful. If you catch yourself stressed throughout the day or overwhelmed or even depressed or anxious, to be able to ask yourself, soften your body again, take a moment, because that allows for that moment of mindfulness, that space between stimulus and response to begin to widen, where there's a bit more choice and possibility, a bit more freedom occurring, a bit more perspective, where we can then say, okay, so what can I do right now? Can I go outside and let the sunshine splash against my face? Can I pet my animal, which is so soothing? Yes, you can ask yourself, what can I do? What can I do? Really important question.
I think that is such an important question, and I love the shift that you're describing, and even just the idea as you're saying it, I'm visualizing a list on like right next to my computer of the things that I can do, and I love that. That's very practical and that's really helpful. And whether it's just as you said, petting a cat or petting a pig, those are things that are right within your province. So, okay, that addresses also the question that I had, which is, for people who are in chronic stress, the idea of those little steps. So if you've got your list, you can have very, very little things that you can do.
I'll just add this for someone who's in chronic stress or chronic pain, is that sometimes we think that our brain does a little trick that says, if I can't get rid of this, or if it's not really getting rid of this stress, it's not making a big enough impact, and so nothing's working. It'll go down that road, because your brain doesn't want you to put all this effort out. It wants to, in order to be disappointed. So with chronic conditions, it is important to notice the awareness that there is a fluctuation in the intensity of the stress and or the pain that's there. So that's important just to notice, just from a continuum point of view. But it's also important to notice like that both can be there at the same time. And so, the engine's been running for a long time. The coals are hot, with chronic conditions. And so we're not going to be able to snap them out. It's not going to be able to just kind of like, you're not going to be able to just put the fire out like that. But what you can do is it's like you're applying a salve in some way. Like it's a wound that's there. It's literally like your nervous system. The way I explain to a lot of people is that our nervous system has been worked and worked and worked. So that's raw. It's like kind of raw. We need to apply a salve, which doesn't mean it's going to be like soothed and gone. But over time, you apply this salve, this relaxing your body around the pain, around the stress, and applying these kind of like soothing methods, because that's probably more what you need right now. A little bit of that, or this kind of more space and rest, and or just even like, as you've seen most likely on this summit and on previous summits before that, just the classic self-compassion moves of using your body, putting your hands on different parts of your body, and just the soothing nature on that, and allowing both to be there at the same time. The raw nervous system and the soothing movement or application, whether that's a gentle stretching or it's the hands on the body or it's getting space and doing gentle walks. It's not that that's meant to get rid of it. It's meant to be applied to it like you're applying a salve to a wound, a physical wound, because chronic stress and chronic pain is a physical wound. And so it's not just mental, it's physical. These are tied together. And so we're applying a salve, but we're using our mind to apply that salve, which is so incredible that we can even do that. And over time, trusting over time, just like with a wound in salve, same thing, physical wound. In time, there will be some healing that goes on. It's to trust that, because it's really physiological. So if you trust medicine, and you'll apply bacitracin to a wound, trust this is the same because you have chronic stress and chronic pain. It's a physical wound. It's a nervous system wound. And so we're applying this ease around the wound. And over time, it's starting to, because the body will heal itself. It'll start to heal itself, but it's an application over time. What would life be like in the days, weeks, and months ahead if there was more of this, if there was like this salve that was applied once or twice a day?
That is a classic Elisha Goldstein question. What would life be like? It sounds like it's like back to your orange. What would life be like if you had that orange sensation every day?
But just to give you a behind the scenes of that, if I had a teacher training program, I would be doing, this is what I would be, this is one of the things I would be teaching, which is, what am I doing in that by asking that question? By asking that question, I'm having your brain shift its focus. So it's shifting its focus, which as it shifts its focus, it opens up possibilities. And it opens up potentially a feeling. What would it be like? I'm asking you to imagine what it would be like, which gets you in touch with a feeling that's there. And that feeling will then drive motivation. The feeling drives motivation. All the marketers out there know that. And so, except they're trying to get us to buy their products. That's the difference. But we can internally market with our quotes by asking these questions, which shifts our focus, creates a feeling, and moves us in the direction of living in line with our best selves.
Let's say you're in the midst of an argument or you're just in one of those overwhelming situations. How do you remember to be mindful? How do you remember?
That's a really good question. And that reminds me of, there are two things you can do in life. You can prepare and respond. And if that's an interest of a person's, to be able to wake up during those moments, then to me, the best thing that they can do is to visualize a moment like that in their minds, and visualize themselves responding differently, waking up and responding differently, because what that does is that creates a memory. And then after they respond differently, you really want to, in your visualization, get really excited and proud of yourself for this good moment that you just had. And why? Because again, our emotions drive our perceptions and our motivations and things like that. So you want to give your brain a memory that's emotionally salient. And so, because those are the ones that we more likely remember. Your brain can't pay attention to the gazillions of memories it has back there, but the ones that are emotionally salient are the ones it pays attention to, the most influential. That's why trauma is such a big deal, is because that's the most emotionally salient experience there, and it impacts like everything. But in the same effect, if you can have really positive experiences that are really emotionally salient too, then that can influence those future moments as well. And so you visualize, just like an athlete visualizes making free throws or kicking a goal, or a piano player visualizes writing, playing that, the thing exactly that they want to, the score exactly like they want to, and it lights up the same motor cortex as the people who are actually playing the piano. We can visualize those tough moments and visualize how we want to be responding to them. And then after that visualization, this is the part that most people miss. is you want to really be proud of yourself or celebrate or something in your own mind, like, wow, I really did it like this. Even if it seems kind of fake a little bit, see if you can like imagine it really happening and feel the feeling of the good feeling it would be if you really met it in that particular way. And that'll create a more emotionally salient memory, which is more likely to wake you up in those moments. So you can actually choose that response versus just being reactive. And ultimately, along the journey of change, we're not going to be perfect. We're going to be very imperfect. I mean, it was Lily Tomlin who'd said, forgiveness means letting go of any hope for a better past. And so we want to be able to be very forgiving with ourselves along the way. Oh, I really practiced this visualizing. And Elisha said that if I do this, I'll be able to wake up, but boy, I really screwed up with my kids again and again. And what the heck is wrong with me? I said, look where your focus is in that moment. Whoa, okay, I'm really focusing on this negative, like beating myself up. Okay, so take a moment, take a deep breath, soften your body. What do I want to focus on? What do I really need? What do I need right now? What does my child need right now? My partner need, my colleague need? What do I, different things to focus on, where we start focusing on repair maybe with ourselves instead of more gnawing at ourselves. Or maybe we focus on, what would be a way I would do this in the future. So we wrap around a growth mindset on it. And we look at like, what can I learn from this? So yeah, the journey is not just this moment, it's the whole journey. And so this moment was a lower point for me. Okay, what can I learn from that? There was a phrase that came out of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy that was called forgive and invite. And as I started adapting that program, which inevitably was a foundational program, which led to uncovering happiness, I started realizing it wasn't just forgive and invite. That wasn't enough, where you just forgive yourself for the time gone by and you invite yourself to begin again. That's not really a growth mindset approach. A growth mindset approach would be forgive yourself for the time gone by, investigate what brought you off track, get clear on it so that you learn from it, bring the learning, and now invite yourself to begin again. So we can kind of do that, along the journey. It could be a really powerful, again, that's a really great phrase for you to write down if you are listening right now, to be able to bring with you during those tough moments where you feel like, oh boy, I really screwed up. You're on a journey, and there's a change journey here. And the best and most adaptive approach you can take in that moment is forgive, investigate, and invite. Investigate with that sense of mindfulness, curiosity. What happened? What would I do differently next time? And then invite yourself to begin again. And maybe one of the things around that is like, what do I need right now? Who got a raw deal here? And who can I, the most important thing here is really the repair.
We've talked a lot about dealing with negative emotions, stress, fear, anxiety, depression, and all of those loops. So it sounds like your work is really helpful for people dealing with those negative emotions and creating, a more positive. What about, are there also applications where you're working with people on, we talk celebrating, but on creating, or underscoring or enabling more positive growth, like resilience, purpose, happiness? Like, do you also sort of look at things like happiness and make more happiness?
So I wrote a whole book on uncovering happiness, but it was through the lens of we create what really happiness is. The reality of what happiness is, which is being able to hold and relate to both skillfully, both the reality of the joy and the fun and the gratitude and these positive moments, and then also the negative moments that are inevitable along our journey. So in month 3 of A Course in Mindful Living, we go deep into self-compassion and forgiveness, because obstacles are really inevitable. But and on the heels of that, after a month of going into what's challenging and noticing what to focus on and how to focus on it, right? It's time to be aware of what's good too. So that's what the whole month 4. So you asked that, the whole month 4 is dedicated to, really kind of enabling and nurturing the strengths through informal and formal meditation practices around gratitude and joy, individually and relationally, being able to uncover what's there right now and how to begin to kind of expand that in our lives. But again, with mindfulness, it begins kind of with our minds, because we can feel this within ourselves. So one of the meditations, as an example, is more of an appreciative, more of the appreciative body scan practice, where you're not just being aware of your body, but you're being aware of how your body allows you to relate to the world. And if there's parts of your body that are disabled, then we kind of move with a little bit more self-compassion around those areas. But it gives us greater insight as we're moving in our lives to like, look what I have right now versus look what I don't have. Right. So that's the mindset. Again, the focus when we're not feeling well is what don't I have? What can't I do? How do I not have as much as this person and will never get to the success of that person? It's how am I less than in some way? Then how is my life less than, or how am I less than? Or what we're shifting the focus on right now, because remember, mindfulness allows for the awareness to be able to choose to shift our focus, is to what do I have? What are the gifts I do have, and what can I do? And it's interesting, if you focus with that with a certain level of practice and repetition, you start to feel a little lighter. You start to feel a little bit more open. And then we kind of move into more of a relational practice. These are just kind of the formal practices of it, but which is more around other people, in our lives, and wishing them, more in a kind of a loving kindness way, but wishing them kind of joy too. So ourselves, and wishing them happiness, and wishing them success, and wishing them strength, and wishing them these great things, and may it continue on and on and on. So you're creating this sense of connection, which is really positive, and there's this sense of joy. So you can journal this, by the way, in your own life. If you're listening to this, again, it's a great thing to take notes on, is to think about the people in your life that you care about, or strangers, much in the same way you would with the loving kindness practice. But what you're really wishing for them is more of these positive attributes, which is may you experience happiness, and may it continue on and on. Or may you experience more joy and laughter in the days of your life. Or may you experience, so you're more focusing on those types of things. And then, as we say, the proof is in the eating of the pudding. So what you want to do is you want to do that and say, like, well, what did I notice? How did it make me feel? I did that. But again, to really simplify this, practice and repetition, just like a muscle, just like learning how to take a fork to our mouth, play a piano, drive a car, same thing. We can learn to increase these strengths with practice and repetition, even if our mind says we can't. We can. So don't let your mind tell you that. Don't let other people tell you that. You absolutely can strengthen these. And that's been sort of the work of my life.
So it sounds like, in order to use mindfulness again as this portal that helps open up your awareness, it sounds like, again, you're talking about shifting focus. So rather than going into that negative loop, what's wrong with me, it's almost like what's right with me, what's right with me, what's right with my life. And it sounds like focusing on those and helping you develop the muscle to notice those, and that helps you create a greater lightness, a greater energy, and a greater awareness of them. Because it's so contrary to what we often do, right? I mean, I'm guilty of it as much as anybody, using mindfulness at times when I'm under a negative experience, and I sort of find my way through that. But I think it's a lovely focus to sort of shift on the positive too. But I don't just have to turn to mindfulness when I'm in stress, anxiety, or depression, or one of those overwhelming emotions, that we can turn to mindfulness to create more of the good stuff that we already have in our lives.
We could do that intentionally, and it can also come implicitly. If you have a strong mindfulness practice and you have a difficult emotion there, you can just attend to it with a warm attention. What you're doing is you're again choosing what to focus on and how to focus on it. And you're focusing on it with a warm attention. And what comes up is maybe a feeling of love. So you're not consciously choosing to focus on what's good. You're actually focusing on what's tough. But what naturally arises is this implicit feeling of love, of care, like you're sending the message, I'm worth paying attention to, and so are you, this difficult emotion. So that could also be something to focus on. But when we're really overwhelmed, a scale of 1 to 10, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you don't have like this really deep groove of practice kind of going on, to focus on the feeling, the difficult feeling, and just with like a pure sense of mindfulness might spin your mind out of control. And again, be kind of more of a recipe for like, look at me, I failed again. Like this will never work for me, right? So what you're focused on, what I can't do again. So instead, what we want to, what's okay to do, we can give ourselves permission to do, is when the stress response is there, when we catch ourselves in those loops, to soften our body, take a deep breath, and ask a different question. We can just ask that different question, just to simplify this. What can I do? What do I have? you know, what would it be like if I was able to relate to this with greater strength? What would my life be like if I was able to build that in the days, weeks, and months ahead? Like, what would be different? Like, you're just asking yourself a different question. You're creating a different focus. It's okay. Or if you do feel like you have the wherewithal, you can soften into it and pay attention to this feeling that's here, and recognize also you're not alone with it. Like Tara Brach's rain practice is great. It's Michelle McDonald's rain practice, but Tara Brach popularized it. And then, I created another practice called SAFE, which is very similar, which soften, allow, feel into it, that same level of inquiry, understanding what we're needing. But the E can go two different ways now. So instead of just natural awareness, non-identification, nurturing, we're kind of doing that in the F. So the N of rain is kind of done in the F anyway, but the E of safe to me is the ultimate self-compassion clincher, which is one of two things. The self-compassion clincher of it is the expanding, which that's the moment where we recognize, like, hey, I'm not alone in this. There's other people that have that are experiencing this same depression loop, anxious loop, whatever it is, same thing that's happening right here. Can I imagine all of those people, maybe even just in my city alone? And in that moment, whatever it was that I was needing for myself to feel strong, to feel at ease, to feel empowered, whatever it was, I can say, may I feel this way? May you feel this way? Think of all those people and think of everyone around the world and saying, may we all feel stronger, happier, whatever it might be. Because part of the definition of self-compassion, or feeling balanced really, is to recognize how connected we really are, how we're not alone in this thing. So the E, I think, brings that rain practice a little bit deeper, because it expands it out. Now with the E, what I've come to understand, that was something I developed a number of years ago, but what I came to understand with the E was it also could stand for empowerment. And so what empowerment is in that moment is, now we're bringing energy into this practice. We're realizing what we're needing, and we're turning to ourselves, may I have this, right? And then we're realizing we're not alone, but also we can turn to our thoughts that are telling us how worthless we are, and what we can't do, and how we'll never be as good as, or this type of stuff. And we might just get in our body, and in the body, that the kind of body positioning, that is the body positioning when you feel like you're in your peak state, you feel like really great in life, when you feel like really empowered, you get into that body stance in that moment. For some people, it's like, they kind of go like this, they get strong in their bodies. For the people that kind of go like this, for the people that kind of tap their chest, whatever it is, and they say, God, these thoughts that are telling me this stuff are such bullshit. Like, it's okay to do that. Or in other ways, kind of look at them and saying, thank you for trying to help me, thoughts. I appreciate you trying to help with my survival, and you kind of do that, but I don't need you right now. But sometimes that empowerment, what I've noticed with people I'm working with in my own life, is sometimes it's okay, and it snaps them. They kind of go, and you kind of get into a different state in that moment. There's something very interesting about that, because it's a little bit antithetical to some lineages of mindfulness, but it's not to maybe the Tibetan way, which is more focused on fierce compassion and fierce mindful, this kind of fierce way. It's a little bit bringing more of the fierceness in you. And you're just kind of getting strong, and you're imagining, like, wow, what would it be like? And then you're asking yourself, what would it be like if I felt, if my life were, if I felt a little happier, if I felt, a little stronger, what might life be like? What would be different? You're visualizing, you're celebrating it in your mind, you're getting in this empowered state, and you walk out of that safe practice feeling like great and more empowered, which influences what you think you can do, because you can. It's totally possible, but your mind's telling you all this nonsense because it's trying to keep you safe and keep you in a state of certainty. It feels safer to feel depressed or anxious because it knows what the parameters are around that. But to risk, to be a little happier, there's some fear in that, because that's unknown, uncertain. And so you'll get all this self-critical mind, or you get this comparing that goes on to keep you in this stuck place. But this empowering aspect of the safe practice can be the clincher that kind of brings you out of that a little bit. So there's a couple things in that safe practice that really kind of expand upon the rain a little bit, that I think could be really supportive to a lot of people. Yeah.
I love that description. I mean, I can feel your energy. I can feel my energy. And I think we each find practices that serve us at different times. And I love that sort of the get up and go energy of that. And I think that seems really just very empowering, to use your word. So wonderful. Thank you very much for that. I have two more questions for you. You've talked about community. Can you describe what is the role of community with mindfulness practices?
It's the role that's been missed by everybody and is the absolute clincher, to use that word again, is absolute clincher to me. I mean, the whole mindfulness field is fantastic. It's amazing. I'm so amazed at like how prolific it is and how many apps are out there and how many meditations are out there, how much content's been created. And at the same time, one of the things that's been so valuable to all the world's wisdom traditions and to the leading companies around the world, the success of like any organization at all or any organized anything, is the feeling of tribe, of community. And if you look at the science behind it, so that's just the world's wisdom traditions. But if you look at the science behind it, there's a science behind our interdependence. Much like we were talking about earlier, the Marie Kondo, effect of like putting things in your environment that can inspire you. When we have an app that we have to use, it can be helpful. We have content we can read, it can be helpful to get into a practice of that. When we have people around us who the very thought of them remind me to live in a particular way, nothing more powerful than that. And so we know that through Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler's work, a couple of researchers that when they studied the Framingham study, and they found that, which was a longitudinal heart disease study, which found that loneliness is contagious and happiness is contagious and obesity is contagious. And so behaviors are contagious and emotions are contagious. We know this because someone comes in your house and they're all of a sudden like breakdown. You see them, tears coming down your eyes. You all of a sudden feel a tug in your heart. Whether it's the mirror neurons or whatever it is, there's a contagiousness to it. And you see someone living in their most inspired way, in a way that you want to live. And it's more likely to remind you to live that way. So my work over the past 5 years, so I've been in this about 20 years, but 5 years has really been a strong focus on community. And the whole reason I created that 6-month program is because I saw all I taught and for years, all the 8-week programs that were out there, which was the standard, at the time, aside from professional certification courses. And all those courses showed in the research is so powerful. All these courses, MBSR, MBCT, all these courses, so powerful, MSc. And what they found is that after the 8 weeks are over, people say, that was great, I had such a great experience, now what? And because there's no now what typically, then people's practices begin to decline and go away. Why? Because you go into your environment and you're surrounded by the same people who remind you to live the same way that you did before. You have these seeds planted, which is nice. But the power of your culture and the group that you have around you is too powerful, typically for a lot of people, to sustain that level of intention and motivation. And so what I realized is in colleges or at your workplace is where you have sustained connection with people over time and you start to kind of adopt those types of practices. So I created a 6-month program so people can spend more time with each other and create relationships with each other over time while learning the material and practicing it. So when they come out of the 6 months, then they have a deeper opportunity to kind of to bring this more sustainably into their life. So what I found was, because I've been doing this for 5 years, my own personal research has shown that even after the 6 months, initially some people were like, that was incredible. I feel like I have some people in my life now, and now what? And so I'm like, oh no, the same 8-week problem. How did that happen? So what I did on the other hand, now what I've done is I've built a community on the other end of that. So now people continue with all of us, even after the 6 months is over, there's still the community that they're continuing in, which has kind of learning in groups and practice circles and things like that continue over time indefinitely, so they can continue with the community aspect and continue their learning experience even after the level of depth is reached after those 6 months. It's an incredible, incredible experience. And so it's powerful in community. Families and community can do this stuff together. Individuals can find their tribe and do it together. And community, I'm telling you, is the absolute, it's the hardest thing for people to get almost, because it seems the least accessible. It's easier just to get a meditation on an app or read this piece of content. But when you can combine that with a back end of a community and a tribe, you're going to have the most power. It's going to make things all so much easier for you as far as integrating this into your life. And everyone knows this really. If they have a community in any other area, they know that picking up the habits and things people are doing, if they really have a tight-knit community, is easier when you're in a community.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely the Technicolor version.
It's the Technicolor version. I like the way you put it. Yeah.
Last question. Can you please lead us through a practice?
So let's do something practical and short that everyone can take with them anywhere, anytime. So this is just a short mindful check-in practice. And I do this because like literally you can do this in a minute or so, but we'll add a little kind of heart infusion in it. And so I just say get in a comfortable position. And any position is good. And the only recommendation that I always give is just to have a, somewhat of a straight spine. And that's mainly just for ease of breathing, really. It also creates a sense of wakefulness too, but lying down is an easy way to have a straight spine as well. And just start off with a couple deep breaths. You could do it initially in through your nose, out through your mouth, because it's an opportunity to just release everything that we've just been discussing or anywhere that you just came from, and settling into this moment right now. And just becoming aware of your body sitting here or lying down or whatever position it's in. And checking in with that sense of curiosity, noticing if there's any areas that are holding or tight anyway, including your face. And notice with that awareness how you might choose to allow those to soften or adjust your body. And also being aware of how you're feeling emotionally. What emotions are here and present in this moment? Could be something as general as comfortable, uncomfortable, neutral. Something more specific like irritated, anxious, joy, calm, ease, restless. Just noticing maybe where you experience that emotion in the body. Emotions are energy in motion. So just being aware. And also being aware of the quality of your attention. Notice if your mind is able to be here, settling in, or if it seems distracted and cluttered with other things. And if so, you can just notice that. Just name that. Soften your body and just begin to re-engage. And considering for a moment, what is it that you're most wanting for yourself right now? If you were to think of a quality, just to feel strong, to feel at ease more in your life, feel more stability, groundedness, feel more love, more acceptance for yourself in general, more kindness towards yourself, more empowerment, courage. Maybe taking a moment to just send that inward. Just within our classic loving kindness type of way, or just breathing in when you breathe in, breathing in, imagining that coming in, breathing out, softening a little bit more. So breathing in, may I feel strong, may I be happy, may I feel loved, may I accept myself just as I am. Whatever it is that you are wanting to bring more into your life. Just imagining that flowing in through the inhalation. Breathing out, relaxing, releasing. Now, taking a moment to just imagine what would the days, weeks, and months ahead be like if there was actually more of this in your life? What would be different? What would you invite more of? As you're imagining it, visualizing that person, noticing how you're feeling in that place. Whatever is there, just feeling, if you can, just imagine yourself feeling so grateful that this has increased in your life. Just for another few moments, just enjoying that space. If it's difficult for you to visualize that, then just settling in again, softening your body. You can try this over and over again. And finally, as we bring this to a close, just acknowledging the choice of taking this time out to engage with this whole time together, with this practice for your own learning, health, and well-being. Just acknowledging this act of self-care, of self-growth. Beginning to bring awareness to your face. If your eyelids are closed, gently allowing them to open.
So thank you very much, Elisha. I'm so grateful for everything that you've shared. You've given us a wonderful taste of the power of your teaching, the breadth of your awareness and scope. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate everything that you've shared with us today. And I just want to thank you for participating. And I want to thank everybody who's been listening to us today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for everyone.